What is ISI and what are they all about?
Sure. We're a Dallas-based company, and I won't bore you with a sales pitch, but about 30 people. We've been in data strategy and architecture since 1985, so a lot of gray hair or no hair. And primarily focus on high-growth Dallas-Fort Worth companies, Fortune 1000 companies, about 200 clients in the greater DFW area that we support on BI platforms.
Okay. And Dan, who do you have with you today on your panel?
I have Asif. I'll let him introduce himself.
We have Asif Masood. Everyone, thank you. Can we give him a round of applause?
I'm Asif Masood with Anji Technologies, also a Dallas-based company. You know, I saw the slide from Hitachi, by the way. Thank you very much for doing this. 25 years, $740 million. Pretty impressive. We are 6 years, about 14 million. So, but we have a target now with us to look at. Okay. You know, we have grown well. We have, you know, I don't want to do a sales pitch. We focus on primarily Dallas-based companies, but really high-end big data, Hadoop ecosystem, data governance, business intelligence, complex software integrations, dealing with CRM, ERP. Doing well, continue to do better, and we appreciate this opportunity here.
Thank you, Asif. Yeah. And against this motion of building the proper data structure is the best place to start for BI solutions, we have Bloem from Slalom Consulting.
Bloem with Slalom Consulting. We're a national organization of consultants based out of Seattle. We've got 16 offices across the U.S. Here in Dallas, we've got about 200 consultants focusing on business advisory services and technology solutions. I happen to lead our business analytics practice. We've got about 45 folks here. Some who focus on data, some who focus on data visualization. So looking forward to this debate today, and appreciate Hitachi for sponsoring this for us.
And Bob, who do you have with you on your
Jeff
team?
Dillenburg, a Slalom alum, now with Consulting.
Hi, everybody. Jeff Dillenburg. I am with AIM Consulting, and we are also a national business and technology consultancy. We have 6 offices in the U.S., about 800 or so consultants. Our headquarters is also in Seattle. Dallas office is located right there in the Galleria. About 65 or 70 folks here in the local market. My primary background is focusing on the business analytics side, data backends all the way through the visualization on the front end, but also some general technology in the app dev, e-commerce, digital analytics space as well. So again, appreciative of the opportunity to speak with everybody today, and hopefully we have a nice lively debate for you and make you think about a few things, hopefully differently.
Jeff Dillenburg, thank you. So this is how we go. We have the first round will opening statements from each member of both panels. The second round will be a Q&A where I will pose some questions, and then we'll open the floor to have questions from the audience. And then the third round will be closing statements from each member of the audience as well. Then during those closing statements, we'll have a closing poll that we'll take as well. Now, the point of the day is we'll compare the first poll from the second poll. Whoever brought the most people from one side to the other, or from the undecided side, will be claimed our winner. So let's begin with round 1 of the motion. Building the proper data structure is the best place to start for a BI solution. We will begin with the 4 team, and we will begin with Dan Hooper. Actually, Asif is elected to go first. We'll begin with Asif.
Can we get a microphone? I'm sorry,
yes,
for the video.
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. So we were hired to solve a peculiar problem in the financial industry. All right. The problem was rules were changing rapidly. Uncle Sam, Fed, hell-bent on making sure those rules were going to be looked at and adhered to rather than loopholes being looked at. All right. So we were asked to create a model that will show the data and how it's impacting the business in this pretty large financial sector. Our client is the largest provider of platform in that industry. So, we go there and we say, been there, know a lot of things. Best thing might be to employ a existing BI packet, do some integration around it, and call it a day. Just to, be fair to everybody, we decided, we create a RFI and go through that exercise. One of the things we did was we created a functional steering committee that pretty much acted as a decision maker, although the decision was with the sponsor, which was our client, okay? So we went through the process of creating an RFI, learned a lot of things that were quite interesting. Some of the things we learned were, how was it going to impact the user? How our marketing department is going to be impacted based on the amount of money that now is going to be needed when we incorporate an existing package into our platform. IT organization really had no interest in building their own platform. They more wanted to integrate one. We went through the RFI process, selected 3 vendors, not 2, as finalists. Went through those presentations with vendors, hired an outside consultant. The role of an outside consultant was to educate us on the impacts on following or not following the rules, on the penalties that the client might incur, and importantly, impact on the user. Internal discussions within the IT group were cost to build, cost to maintain, all right? Marketing decisions were, if we price this thing out, how does it impact our business, survivability, our, position in the market. Based on all those, we looked at one-time cost of development, cost to maintain. Most importantly, if we develop our own model, our own platform, and we upsell it, then the function becomes a bottom line evaluation rather than a top line evaluation now, because we have revenue coming in rather than just revenue going out. Long story short, we came to a decision point. The decision was, IT department actually decided they're going to build a solution rather than buy one, simply because it was going to be more optimum. There were many release schedules from vendors that we didn't have to deal with. We didn't have to create expertise that learned what this thing that we were going to bring in-house. It allowed us to increase our revenue net margins, because now we had another tool to sell, another price point which is higher than what we had. Took us less than 17 months to get an ROI on about a 10-month development process. User satisfaction was very, very wonderful. We saw that in our first user conference. And, I thought we ended up with a pretty decent outcome, based, especially coming from what we had decided we were going to do going into the exercise. Thank you.
Let's give a hand for Asif. Yes. Okay. Next, we'll have...
We're not finished with our opening statement.
Oh, you guys wanted to tag team it? Okay. Normally we alternate, but we'll make an exception because actually that's exactly what our 4 team wanted to do. So,
all right.
Okay. So, actually, you can go next. Now we have Dan Hooper, 4.
My wife tells me I don't need a microphone, but I'll hold one nonetheless. So just to follow up on Asif's comments, business intelligence has been in the top 3 priorities for CIOs for over 20 years. Sounds great, but the problem is it tells us we're not getting the job done. And our company, the experience that we have had, has really been very counterintuitive to the marketplace. We've been swimming upstream against traditional data warehousing projects. Let's build it, they'll come. $3 million 5 years later, no one knows what it is or how to use it. We've been taking a completely different approach, which we're happy to say the market has turned towards. And there really are 3 core principles in the success that we have in our clients. A very diverse group of clients, leading hospital, healthcare providers, financial industry, across the board in manufacturing, distribution, real estate, construction, energy, oil and gas. If you call out a Fortune 100 company in Dallas, they're probably one of our clients. But the first is architecture over application. So the first principle that we've held to is, before you buy or build anything, you need a good definition of the requirements, what's going to make this a success, what will the users consume, and what will they leverage. So, most often data has to be cleansed. The biggest thing that we face, whether a client wants to admit it or not, is how good their data is, and it's almost always significantly worse than they think. So getting data staged, getting it properly architected is critical before you decide what tool should present it. The audience, you got to know your audience. And for years, we've produced millions of dollars of shelfware with companies buying software up front and then determining who will use it and how they'll use it. And the audience that bought it was a small number of power analysts and developers, less than 10% of the consumer audience. And then the end users were said, here, use it. Well, you know what? If I'm a busy regional manager, I don't have time to drag and drop and build a report. Just give me my report. So a lot of these companies sat on millions of dollars of software, a mistake made by buying before they knew what they needed. And last but not least, in this day and age, is scalability. Data is exploding, whether it's big data that's coming in, social media analytics, and the demand for data that we haven't even thought about structuring yet. So take Dodd-Frank. That's going to produce 11 federal agencies the size of the IRS. Sarbanes-Oxley has already gotten halfway there. So the amount of data just to stay in compliance is amazing. And if you don't have a well-architected foundation, if you're building your solution around specialists and tribal knowledge of how to get to the data, then it's not scalable. So you need to be rigid and you need to be deliberate about that upfront design. So it's kind of like buying a house. You wouldn't buy a house that was built with the best tools and no blueprint. So the place to start is with good architecture up front. That's the best practice, and that's our motion, and I look forward to hear what Bob and Jeff have to say.
Let's hear it for Dan Hoover.
And that was the 14 for the motion. Building the proper data structure is the best place to start for a BI solution. Now to introduce the against side and their position is Bob Boland. He will begin.
Thanks, guys. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Can you see me? We're going to sit down instead of stand up. We're going to have more of a conversation here. So, interesting points that you guys make. It took a while to get to it, right? We want to get to some speed to insight. We want to get time to market. We want to talk about those things today. So, in today's landscape of data visualization and data analytics tools, consumers have that data. They have a fairly broad array of tools that they can work with, right? And it's giving them access to data like never before, right? Tools like Tableau, Click, Power BI, all these things are giving you access to that data. We hear a lot of tech terms these days about big data, Hadoop, cloud, data democracy. Right? What does all of that mean, right? And how does that translate to businesses capitalizing on their analytical capital, right? The human, the person between the chair and the computer, right? I would hazard to say that the best way to expose that data and to expose that analytical capital is by giving them a tool that really enables them to propagate and to enable data democracy, right? Enabling that true data democracy, making it available to those who need it, when they need it, how they need it, and with the freedom to intelligently make decisions and use it as they choose. So enabling them sooner than later with a tool that has those capabilities is key. And there's a few points on why we're taking this position. So first of all, end users aren't having to translate sometimes loosely defined requirements. I don't know what I'm going to need after 10 months of defining an infrastructure and 17 months to generate an ROI, right? So I don't want to translate, I don't want to have to spend the time to translate those requirements into documents, technical specs, and turn them over to a development team and have what I interpret as a requirement be interpreted differently by a development team. right? The purpose of a data visualization and exploration tool is for users to have a conversation with their data, to be able to tell a story with that information, to explore it quickly, to twist it, and turn it in such a manner that they can bring in and blend a variety of data sources that are changing rapidly, right? The big data systems, these Hadoop ecosystems, you have unstructured data, right? Social is moving at the speed of thought, right? We've got to stay up to speed with that, not rely on spending so much time putting together a data model that by the time we get around to doing analytics, the car's passed, right? We've missed the boat, right? We want to be able to quickly decide whether that spreadsheet on my desktop, that article that came out that I read, this post of stock data that's coming in, the stream of information, is relevant to my analytics or not, right? If I try to fit that through a traditional data warehousing process or fit it into a perfectly designed data model, I'm going to miss the boat. I want to know now or very quickly whether I can use that data or not. So for me, putting together a picture, right, the saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? It really is. So let's use a data visualization tool to help define what those requirements are going forward.
So we're going to continue the conversation back and forth a bit as we go through. So it probably makes sense to I love applause. Maybe hold applause to the end and see if it's warranted or not. So capitalizing on what Bob was saying, one of the things that spoke to me most about the against side of this argument is this concept of speed to market, and maybe more appropriately for this audience and the topic that we're talking about today, speed to insight. We want to have an understanding of how to, hopefully succeed fast, but just as importantly, in some instances, the knowledge and security of what failing fast means so you can let go of some of the topics and ideas where you're spending your time and energy. This principle has been used for a very long time in lean manufacturing. We see it a lot of times now in some of our more agile frameworks like SAFe and such like that. And this is a perspective that is optimizing processes and, probably more importantly, progress to discover value quickly. We're in search of kind of that speed to market, that idea of I want to be able to use limited resources that I have and apply them in a way that I know I'm going to get the biggest return on that and the fastest and most valuable method possible. All of this is, maybe best illustrated, I think. I don't know if there's any fans of the HBO series out there, Silicon Valley. Any show of hands that are out there? For those of you that are aware of it, you'll get this. Those that haven't seen it, if you have HBO or have access to it, go check it out. But we're seeing this play out in popular culture right now. There's a small upstart technology firm called Pied Piper, startup VC funded, trying to find a way to get their product, get their solution to market as fast as they can. And sitting across the table from them is the 800-pound gorilla in the space, Cooley. So think of Google, think of Facebook, think of all the tech companies that are out there right now. And they're doing everything they can to quash the nimbleness, the aggressiveness, and the flexibility that this Pied Piper organization has to get their ideas of a compression algorithm to market as fast as they can. And I'm sitting here watching this thinking, why is this something that's limited to manufacturing space? Why is this something that's limited to app dev or technology as a general space? Why is this something that, as a professional, why can't we apply some of those same concepts to BI and to insight? And maybe said more strongly, why aren't we doing that more aggressively and more quickly? If I can aim and arm myself and my organization, my analysts, my executives, with the tools and the power to go out and use the information that's available to them, because every organization today has data in some fashion or form. There are databases, there are warehouses, marts, ODSs, lists, purchase data, rented data. Data does exist. Oftentimes too much data exists, and that's part of the problem, is trying to get through the noise. But if I have a hypothesis in my head of something that I'd like to try and go on that lean approach, that kind of speed to insight, that fail fast or succeed fast mentality, I can take one of those existing tools that Bob mentioned earlier that are now available in the market, that are a little more user-friendly, and have a very specific purpose to explore and discover value that might be out there, and connect to that data. Those tools are great at ingesting and manipulating that data. Historically, we spend a lot of time and energy formatting that information and tracking down that information before we actually have the opportunity to analyze it and get value out of that. And I believe strongly that one of the biggest benefits that we have of actually starting with a very specific perspective here is that we should be doing everything we can to accelerate this process of discovery within the information that we have.
So Jeff, you talk about speed to market. Businesses are going to continue to make decisions on a daily basis. We're not going to wait 27 months to have the 800-pound gorilla rolled out to the enterprise, right? We're going to do that with or without a fully baked data model, right? And I'm not suggesting that a properly formulated data model is unnecessary, only that it shouldn't be the bottleneck for us to acquire and deploy in a governed manner, right? The governance around how you deploy it is key, but acquiring and deploying a data visualization and exploration tool should be done quickly so that you can succeed fast or fail fast, right, to Jeff's point. Now, these tools need to be in the hands of the people that are driving and making those business decisions. We don't need to bottleneck it with development cycles.
And Bob, I think that's Michelle's combined time there.
We're doing 7 or 14 minutes?
We're doing
14, yeah, and you guys, you're at it, because we shaved a little bit.
I'm at 7 on my timer right here.
Okay,
that's
yeah. We're going to compress it just because of your time schedule too, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, but let's give a hand for the against side. Sorry about that, Bob.
I'd actually like him to keep going because he's really helping our side of the argument.
Well, this might be your chance to do that here in just a second. We're going to move on to the second round of today's event. We're going to go ahead and close the polling for the first question, for the first half of our event. The second round will be a question and answering phase where I'll pose some questions, the audience will be able to pose questions, and the panelists will be able to interact with themselves on the different topics that they've displayed. The motion is building the proper data structure is the best place to start for a BI solution. The main points given by the for side was that other business structures or other business sectors will play a role in how a build versus buy decision is made. So you have to, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, you have to have them involved in that process as well. You're able to get a faster or ROI if you have the proper data structure. And architecture over application, I believe, Dan, was a point that you were stressing, is vital. It's key to everything. It's the best place to start, that's in your opinion. And finally, busy managers might not have the time to drag and drop their own. The tool might be giving them speed, but they might not even have that bandwidth to do that. And on the against side, the gentleman there, some of their main points was time to market can be a value in itself. Just being able to get that speed can produce an ROI in itself, and also that the knowledge that you gain from that speed to market is just as valuable as learning your failures. I believe that's a point that Jeff made, that you learn through your failures, and you can also learn through this acceleration of speed to market, and that proper data structure is not unnecessary. However, it shouldn't be the bottleneck. And then finally, I think one of your major points is that watching HBO can teach you about business intelligence and analytics. I think that was a major part there. So yes. So we're going to move on into the second round. And question for Asif. Could you go into some detail about because you had a direct use case. Mm-hmm. Could you just really briefly just tell us how was the ROI realized?
Okay. We looked at the cost to create, all right? That included the cost of consulting, time to window. Most people will forget to quantize time to window because it can kill a business opportunity. We looked at additional revenues that were going to come in, all right? We looked at the training costs, and we came up with the amount of money that was going to be spent and the amount of money that was going to be received. So it was a pretty simple formula. When is this company going to, get back on the investment, and how this investment was going to play out over the course of 2 to 3 years? Because then, rules change. We're back at it again. That's the beautiful world of consulting.
Thank you, Asif. Mr. Hooper.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned architecture over application. Do you have any examples of that? Just like your partner had the use case, can you give us a brief example of something that was successful?
Well, I'll give you a great example of a client of ours that went through their major home builder, went through 7 regional acquisitions, had a difficult time answering questions like, what's our revenue per state? Well, the problem is the data said you have 750 states because Texas is TEX, it's TX, it's TEXAS, it's T. So until the data was clean, the best tool in the world was going to give you the wrong answer. So we're not saying tools are not a part of this strategy, but you don't want to start visualizing bad data until you know that the data is good and that you're really answering questions that are meaningful to the business.
Well, that's a direct comment to you. What do you guys think about that last half of his answer there?
So I'll take that. It was part of our opening statement as well. But being able to understand and see that I have bad data quickly is important to me, right? I have data stewards. I have people working on collecting and inputting data. If I can see that I've got TX, Texas, Tejas, or any other version thereof, right? Part of Louisiana Purchase if we're going way back, right? So I want to know that that data is bad. I don't want to have to wait for a properly formed data model. I'm intelligent. My business analysts are intelligent. I can see that if I have 700 states that I'm looking at, something's wrong in the data. We've got to go fix it upstream, right? But with some of these data visualization tools that allow me to do some analytics and apply some of that intellectual capital to the visualization and make more informed decisions, I feel that I'm better equipped and businesses are better equipped to respond to that quickly changing business environment.
Okay. Now, something to directly challenge your claim about time to market can be valuable. We just heard Asif give a very poignant example, direct example of an ROI that he's dealt with. How would you advise someone that they could start to harness their value? Because it's something that's hard to, I would say, it's very hard to see.
Yeah, I think that's a great challenge, and I think that they're probably, in the spirit of this debate, we have a for position and an against position, but they're probably in a single size fits all answer in all cases. And I think we can have a whole separate debate on that if we want to. But for me, how many examples do we have of case study after case study after case study? Much the same way that there's a lot of software purchases that get shelved and not used appropriately. How many months or quarters or years of investment and time and energy to kind of figure out kind of what the business needs from a data and data structure perspective have gone into something where ultimately the end result has been and the business actually hasn't adopted it. The business actually hasn't found that it's kept up with the speed of change of that organization. And so an ROI value in the speed to market to me is, if we base some things on hypothesis starting point. And I'm not decrying the fact that we ultimately need to keep up from a data structure, data strategy, data quality perspective. That has to happen as well. Let's not ignore it. But it shouldn't be the bottleneck perspective. But if we start with a hypothesis and say, I believe that if I had better information or better insight about X, that I can impact my end result, whether it be sales, whether it be service, whether it be growth-based, or whether it be bottom line optimization and efficiency-based. I want to look at the information that's available to me and get to a very quick perspective. That should inform the direction of that investment, that structure. That should inform the direction of data quality, data governance, where to make my investments, whether it be in technology, whether it be in requirements, whether it be in new architectures and actually modifying and modernizing. From maybe historical-based data architectures to taking advantage of some of the more modern architectures that are out there. And I think that front-end tip of the spear analysis and insight that comes from that, based on hypothesis, can actually accelerate that pace to know how to spend that money more appropriately, both on the back end of the systems as well as the front end.
Do you gentlemen have a response to any of his ROI statements there?
Actually, I agree with everything that was said there. But think about the typical company with a sales group, a marketing team, manufacturing, production, inventory control, HR. Okay, we're all going to visualize our data. Well, I like ClickView. Well, I like Tableau. Well, I like Cognos because that's what I grew up on. Companies that perform best have one place to go, one tool set, one throat to choke, and not multiple tools. So think about the long term in respect to that. And again, everything that's being said here as far as time to market and the role of visualization and democracy, data democracy, is absolutely true. It's the real question here is where do you start? And until you have the data, an understanding of your data and how you need to turn that into profit. Buying a set of hammers, saws, or a set of bricks before you know what the house is going to look like just doesn't make a lot of sense.
And I just had a question that just jumped out in my head. It's not one of the prepared ones that we had. But you said earlier that busy managers might not have the time to build their reports. And just the first thing that jumped, I was like, isn't that their job though in some cases?
No, it's not their job. Their job is to visualize the data and make decisions. Their job is to make decisions based on verifiable realities of the condition of their business. And asking them to be a data discovery person, which not every tool does, but many rely on that, or asking them to wait 10 minutes while a specialist does it for them is counterproductive.
Thank you. We'd like to open the floor to questions from the audience. Please, I know everyone's got something or some kind of experience they could pull from. So, do we have anyone like to begin? Is that you have a question?
No.
Oh, he was just saying that. Okay. Is it anyone? Sure.
To your example about Texas, the different variations, I've dealt with that in the past as well. In your client scenario, is that a problem that's resolved in a matter of hours to days or days to weeks in your scenario? And then I turn the question to you guys. How quickly is that resolved in your just utilizing the tool to analyze the data? Does that make sense?
In the scenario of a $12 billion home builder, the actual time it took to clean the data was a matter of weeks.
And resolve the issue long term?
In fact, less than that. The bigger issue was getting them all to agree, this is how we want to define a customer, this is how we want to define a prospect. It was a lot more, obviously, to it than just, well, this is TX because that's Texas. So the longer cycle was getting them to come to a consensus on what the definition of gross margin is, what the definition of this region is, and what forecasts need to go against this data and that sort of thing. But the actual cleansing part, it would have been facilitated with a tool to see what's wrong, but it still had to be done at the database level.
And do you need him to repeat that question? Okay, go ahead.
Either way. I'll take it. So much the same way that Dan had offered earlier, I agree with what he said, that the long tent in this poll is actually not necessarily the time to actually make that change. The governance and the standardization and kind of the corralling of understanding of how to have different stakeholders actually agree is where that exists. But the beauty of using the tool, a front-end tool on this, that doesn't solve the problem either. What that does is it exposes that there's a conversation to be had. It exposes that you need to bring people to the table, and it actually gives hard facts and hard proof, and actually seeing it on a chart or a graph, or someone looking at this and saying, well, this doesn't make any sense because there are 750 states. I want to speed that up, and I want to get that in the hands of people that can actually come to that table faster and resolve that. And that will happen in the back end, that will happen in the warehouse, it will happen with data quality checks, and that's how you fix and correct that. But if I'm waiting for a release cycle of a traditional warehouse, ETL to warehouse to report, build, and distribution, and I'm in a test process, if you're doing it in an agile methodology, maybe that's a couple weeks. If you're doing it in the waterfall methodology, that could be a couple months before that's exposed in the first test scenario. And I think there's value to be gained in actually accelerating that visibility, but the real value is exactly what Dan said too, which is getting the people to the table and solving it there. And we can do that in parallel. We can expose, hand off for something to be worked, and then start looking at the next piece of information that we want to get some insight off of.
Thank you, Jeff. Another question? Yes.
I have a question. So from your combined experience with companies that are looking to go down this road of data visualization, figuring out data structures, what's the right way to go about this? From your experience, what's a common pitfall, what's a common mistake that companies tend to make when they approach you? And what guidance would you provide to navigate around that?
We'll start with the against team.
I'm going to take this one. Sure, go ahead.
So, to repeat the questions, what are some common pitfalls of taking a data visualization approach first, as opposed to a proper data model? Is that?
Or when someone approaches you for a consulting engagement, what's a common mistake that they make in the framing of how they approach you, and how would you just navigating around that. What's a common mistake, and how should we reframe? How should they approach it?
It's basically what you're doing right now. How do you get people to come on to your side of this argument?
Yeah.
So again, if we look at the topic of the debate here and say, do we do a proper data model first, or we do a data visualization tool first? And I think there's absolutely value in having that properly formed data model and to spend the time and to understand what ultimately is the business problem that you're trying to solve, right? We get approached a lot. We've got massive system, or we've got a lot of different tools in place. What do we do to rationalize those? Or we bought a tool and we were promised this vision of grandeur that we can now connect and go, right? But we're running into challenges, right? So the question, it's more of a debate really, is have you defined what your business problem is? Do you know what you're trying to solve? What are you trying to get at? Is it cleaning data? Is it increasing you're improving the bottom line? Is it better understanding of what your HR is doing? What is the business problem, right? If you haven't defined that, it doesn't matter if you've got good data or good tools, right? Define that business problem first. What are you trying to get at?
Okay, and we'll pose that same question to Asif. I believe the question was, what are some of the, and I guess from your side of it, it'll be, what are some of the pitfalls that you see companies doing when they want to approach a data model, when they want to do the structure?
You know, Max, right?
Yes.
When you pose that question, I go, God darn it, that was very much part of my closing statement.
You might want to save it because it's coming up soon, but go ahead.
But I will say this, okay? So there are two types of companies, mostly. Those that plan well and those that react. I'm sure none of the people that are here have companies that react, they all plan well. But there are companies that also plan well that sometimes have to react. Case in point, Apple, Maps, you know, people losing jobs and all that kind of stuff. Okay. What we have seen in almost all cases, you must plan. You must plan around what is known to you, and that is your data. Okay? If you don't know what you have, how are you going to build it? Or what basis are you going to have to make a recommendation to the people who have the revenue or the purse strings on what to buy? I recommend we look into what we have to what we want. Be cautious. Not always look at, if we made a recommendation, that we may lose our job, because that's the biggest fear that people have, consequently leading to different paths. You know, that's why we had companies like Arthur Andersen, you know, because you never got fired by choosing Arthur Andersen or IBM. Know what you have, build on that. Now, if we need to incorporate something to help further, sure. But you got to know what you have to decide on.
Thank you, Asif. Any other questions? I know we saw another. Yes. Go ahead.
My name is Mike Moses with SSG. My question to the panel is this. With the proliferation of open source tools such as R, Microsoft, and others, how does that impact this decision as we move away from possible proprietary platforms that have been used in the past?
Were you guys able to hear that? Okay.
Just when you say decision, can you say a little more about that?
The decision before us today as to whether build versus buy, does the availability of open source platforms that have a great amount of capability, does that influence that decision?
For some organizations, I think it absolutely does. For others, I think that that's probably a distraction. And I'm a big believer in the fact that, you know, while we're arguing a position on this side of the room about the benefit and value of using some of the technologies that are available out there just as a place to start, it doesn't mean that the starting solution should be buy a new technology or acquire a new technology and start with that brand new one. It oftentimes should start with what you have and how you leverage that better. And Dan offered a perspective about, you know, the choices that might be made. I'm gonna crucify or bastardize this one from what you said, so you can correct me in rebuttal if you'd like. But you know, having multiple choices from where to go to get this information, or what tooling or what tool sets or technologies to use to provide this insight, I actually see that's changing. in today's market. I actually see that a lot of organizations are embracing using multiple tools that can accomplish the same sets of core capabilities, but the ones who are doing it well and utilizing those well are the ones that actually are aligning those specific tools and the specific feature sets of those tools with a specific purpose and guidance, and not just leaving it wide open for choice or there's duplication. So whether that means bringing in an open source tool that maybe has a lower cost of entry from a licensing perspective and a maintenance and support perspective, that might be a way to accelerate. You also have to look at the implications that that has on your staff. You know, the people that you have that are going to have to run and maintain and support and provide this analysis and provide this insight. What's the learning curve? What's the perspective that's actually going to keep and retain your employees in terms of challenging them with some strategic thinking as opposed to more tactical data manipulation, data movement, and how does that fit with the overall goal of your organization and what your core competencies are?
Dan, I'll give you the opportunity to rebut that notion of that he's seeing multiple tools are actually being used, and it's actually a way for talent retention as well in some cases.
Well, to come back to your question as far as the role of open source systems, that also begs the question of what tolerance does a company have? What technology platform do they have? Do they have people that understand it, or they have to go hire to get there? But there's no question that open source is going to continue, just like the cloud, is going to continue to revolutionize and change the big players. I mean, I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but I wouldn't want to be selling a dime of IBM software today. And I wouldn't want to be selling Microsoft, frankly, today either. But the real question comes back in terms of data governance when we're talking about this whole area of business intelligence. We've been in front of audiences with 50 to 250 people, very technical audience, who has a data warehouse or something like that, all the hands are up, who has a data governance model. And you know, the liars or the guys that want to keep their job kind of go like, nobody has it. And it's the 800-pound gorilla that we have to address. And when you get into open systems, you get into all kinds of questions of integrity. How do I go back and replicate a decision that I made before? And this area of this debate is not really relevant to the answer I'm giving you from a standpoint of pro or con, but the governance piece is huge, particularly going forward. Data is exploding, and the demand to be able to prove that you did the right thing and that you can go back in time and replicate that is going to be massive from this point forward. Just ask the folks at any of the oil companies around here who forgot to hedge when oil was at $110 a barrel. So it's going to be incumbent on us as business users, as IT people, to have a deliberate governance model that we can show to the compliance people that come in and say, this is how well we're architected.
Thank you, Dan. So one final question, and you've got about a minute and a half each to pose this. I wanted to go back to what you said earlier about the bottleneck. No longer this data process, this data structuring process becoming the bottleneck. Just briefly, because this is something that probably everyone here in the room has dealt with. How does one not become this bottleneck, in your opinion?
I'll tell you, since it was mine. So the question being, how does the development of a data model not become a bottleneck? So I still think, and part of that was, there were 2 points to that. It was the development of a data model shouldn't be the bottleneck, and to your point, data governance, right, or data governance, as long as you're deploying these tools that allow the exploration of data in a governed fashion, I think you can still drive towards the development of a well-formed data model using those tools, right? Because those are going to enable the insights. They're going to enable us to get to what that data model should look like quicker, rather than sitting around a bunch of requirements gathering sessions with business and IT. Let the analysts define what that is. They're the ones that are driving the insights. They're the ones that are digging through the information and informing the senior leadership. And they're not the ones that should be going out and dragging and dropping and building reports. You should still deliver those as the analysts. Don't make them be data jockeys. Let them be data junkies, right?
Thank you, Bob. And finally, how would this process not become, without the tools, how do you not have this process become a bottleneck? Like, the against side has presented?
Well, there are bottlenecks, and then there are foundational pieces that you have to have. So think of democracy. If we didn't have a good system of electing, okay, forget about today, but and so forth, and a system of governance, then democracy is absolutely useless. It's chaos. And so, do I want to have tools that connect directly to my source system? I get there real quickly, and gee, a guy like me runs a query that dims the lights and order entry or e-commerce just shuts down because I want to know how someone behaved over the last 20 years from the database. Probably not a good place to start. So from a standpoint of bottlenecks, you have to get things in the right order. We have clients that have been getting intelligence starting from zero within a matter of weeks. We've taken clients, a major hotel company, from zero to completely vetted and trusted BI platform in less than 6 months. They had 150 properties, all of them with different property management systems, all of that integrated into one place. Frankly, it would have been a disaster for them had they started with a tool to try to figure that out and go touch all those systems before the foundation was in place. So bottlenecks, there are always going to be bottlenecks, but you don't want to be the bottleneck to be the end game. And when you buy a tool, you've committed. So think about that.
Thank you, Dan. And that concludes our second round of question and response. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. So finally, we will move directly into our final round. That is the closing statements. And the second poll, we'll open the second poll. You will be able to vote until the conclusion of this final round, and then we will give the results. We will begin this final round with the against side, and I believe that's Jeff. Or you guys, Bob will begin with closing arguments.
Do we have 2 minutes total or 2 minutes each?
2 minutes each.
Okay.
All right, I'll speak quickly. All right, so you guys have talked a lot about the perfect data model. We're defining that foundation, right? We're all striving for nirvana, right? Nirvana is that perfect data model. It is that perfect human data interface, right? It's knowing what you want, how you want it, and when you want it. But I mean, reality is nirvana doesn't exist, right? A great visualization tool can still showcase you incorrect and misleading data, no matter how conscientious the data modeling is that happens up front, right? And there's no, and again, to my point, when we open this debate, there's no substitute for that human intellectual capital of the person between the chair and the keyboard, right? The ability to interpret and make intelligent decisions on the data that's being presented to them through those data visualizations tools. So put the power in the hands of the people sooner than later. Don't handicap them up front, right? They're driving the decisions today. Let's enable them to drive and make more informed decisions today rather than tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob Bloem. Actually, we're going to come to this. We're going to come to 4. Yes, and closing arguments for closing statement for 4. We'll have Asif, Masood.